Robinson joins us to explain the Islamification of Europe. Blaze News Tonight starts right now. Welcome to The Chaos. I'm Jill Savage. Today is Wednesday, August 7th. It's been one day since Kamala Harris chose Minnesota Governor Tim Walz as her running mate. And it's since come to light that Walz has reportedly obscured the details of his service in the Army National Guard. And one of his former colleagues has accused him of stolen valor. So here to discuss is Matthew Peterson, editor-in-chief of Blaze Media, and American Moment Chief's Operation Officer Nick Solheim. So Nick, thanks so much for joining us today. How do you think that this is going to impact the campaign with this news about Walz?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very interesting to see, that Walz was the VP pick here. This is not necessarily a recent story by any means. The letter that was originally written by some commanding officers of the Minnesota National Guard was originally released in 2018. So it's been public information ever since. I think it's very interesting to look back at, 2005. A lot of people may not remember, but basically everyone and their brother was having to deploy, everyone that was in the military anyway, was having to deploy to Iraq. And when Walz was notified in early 2005 that his battalion would be deploying to Iraq, he mysteriously decided to retire at that point in time in May of that year. And his battalion ended up serving 22 months in Iraq without, their most senior non-commissioned officer in the Minnesota National Guard. I think it's a disgrace, especially when you compare it with the admirable military service of Senator Vance, who is President Trump's running mate. I think it's quite the contrast.
Yeah, Nick, can you tell us, you're from Minnesota. I mean, you just wrote this piece with Newsweek, right? For people out there who are wondering, just who is this guy? What do you think motivates him? What's he like?
Yeah, I mean, Walz is a very interesting guy. He's originally from Nebraska, but spent his time as a high school social studies teacher and as a member of Congress in the 1st District in southern Minnesota. It's a very rural part of Minnesota. It's obviously on the border with Iowa. It's a very similar demographic of people. And the thing that I've been trying to say, in addition to all the things that are coming to light about Governor Walz, is that Republicans would underestimate him at their own peril. I mean, this is a guy that's very good on the stump, does well with both rural voters as well as urban voters. I think we see this in the national conversation as well, how he's been able to, marry the progressives and the moderates in support of his vice presidential candidacy. I think ultimately, what motivates him is a radical progressive ideology on everything from immigration to trade to foreign policy. I mean, Minnesota, is the largest location of Somali immigrants anywhere in the world. It's wreaked quite a bit of havoc. He's also radical on policing, as nobody needs reminding of the George Floyd riots, which started in Minneapolis in 2020. What motivates him is ultimately progressive radicalism.
That's quite the laundry list of things that you just went through. But Tampon Tim wasn't mentioned in there, but it has been trending on X because he signed a bill into law that forced schools to put menstrual products in boys' bathrooms. It seems like he's focusing on these issues. And why are we dealing with something that is this granular when there are so many other things that he could have been focusing on instead?
I have to say right off the bat, I really like the nickname Tampon Tim. I hope President Trump, decides to take that up as one of his nicknames. But the thing that I would say is that, Governor Walz, this is just one of many social issues that he is a complete radical on. Minnesota under Governor Walz has one of the most radical policies on abortion in the entire nation out of most other states. It's basically legal up until birth. We also had for the minutia of stuff that goes through the state legislature in Minnesota, there was also a part of the law that was removed in terms of talking about sexual identity, where it removed basically people who are sexually attracted to children, potentially making them a protected sexual class in Minnesota law. I mean, he's an absolute radical, totally out of touch with the vast majority of people that live in Minnesota, especially the people that come from his former congressional district. And I think that the American people will see that as he gets, new media scrutiny in the months to come.
Nick, last night we saw Squad member and Missouri Congresswoman Cori Bush lose in her primary. Here's what she had to say after her speech.
Pulling me away from my position as Congresswoman. All you did was take some of the strings off. Because see, now I don't have to worry about some strings that I have attached, and as much as I love my job. But all they did was radicalize me, and so now they need to be afraid. AIPAC, I'm coming to tear your kingdom down.
It's not quite the Howard Dean squawk, but it's still up there, I think, in some of the political nature of the speeches that come out after they lose, and they go and just kind of go a little bit crazy. But Nick, let me ask you, does it feel like things are finally turning a little bit against the progressives right now?
I think the first thing I would say is that I wasn't aware that anyone in the squad had any strings on them in the first place with all the crazy things that they've been saying, and projecting into our national conversation for the last couple of years. But I certainly think that, progressives are on their back foot in a certain sense. I mean, setting aside the pick of Governor Walz as VP, I mean, you've seen the newly minted presidential nominee, Kamala Harris, previously, walked back several of her statements that she made during her race for the presidency in 2019. And note, I say 2019 because she was so radical, she never even made it to 2020. She dropped out prior to the election year that she was running it. And so I think it'll be really fascinating to see where they go to next and how they walk back these statements such as Medicare for all, there are no borders, we need to defund the police, et cetera. I don't really see any way in which progressive policies are going to be a winning message for the Democrats coming into this election.
And as crazy as that soundbite is, I know that Walz has come out and he's made some comments about free speech. Let's go ahead and take a listen.
I think we need to push back on this. There's no guarantee to free speech on misinformation or hate speech, and especially around our democracy.
So the first soundbite with Cori Bush is a little crazy. This one is very concerning. Nick, what do you make of him saying this?
Yeah, I mean, this is, very typical coming from the guy who instituted a hotline in the state of Minnesota to tattle on your neighbors during the COVID lockdown in 2020. Tim Walz has never believed in free speech. He's notorious for, allowing free speech when it's people that he agrees with. But, such as the BLM riots in 2020, when by the way, we were told, these riots are fine. These are totally exempt from COVID. It's fine to have all these people, in the streets without a mask. I think it's very terrifying to hear such a remark from the Democratic vice presidential nominee of the United States. I certainly think it's more radical even than anything we've heard in recent years from the Democrats. But as someone from Minnesota, I mean, this is part and parcel of what you get with Tim Walz.
Nick, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Matt, do you want to have one final word on free speech there? It's misinformation if it's not what they have approved.
Yeah, I mean, they're totally against free speech. That's gone. And so we need to accept that and move on. I think the question with Walz is he a mistake because he's too radical, or is, as Nick suggested, maybe someone we should be worried about? So I think that was alarming, but good to hear from Nick.
We'll have plenty of time to be breaking it all down before the election. But when we come back, Elon Musk plays offense against what he calls a cartel of advertisers. Next. Elon Musk's X is suing advertisers over an illegal boycott that came to light in the House Judiciary Committee report. Elon seems to be ramping things up, as he posted on X yesterday. "We tried for peace for 2 years. Now it is war." So here to break this all down is Allum Bokhari, Foundation for Freedom Online Managing Director. So Allum, thanks so much for joining us. And let's talk about just the big picture. What does this lawsuit mean for free speech?
So X is suing an organization called GARM, the Global Alliance for Responsible Media. And what that is it's a coalition of essentially the entire advertising industry. It represents 90% of ad spending worldwide. So basically the entire industry operating as a kind of cartel. And what it does is it tells you right there in the name, Alliance for Responsible Media. So the industry bands together and it tells website owners and owners of media companies and platform owners like Elon Musk, well, if you don't meet our requirements for brand safety, if the content on your site or your platform doesn't meet our standards for responsible media, then we're just going to pull all our ad revenue and essentially try and put you out of business by taking away this massive revenue funnel. And what's important is that it's the entire industry acting in concert. So, the House Judiciary Committee has focused on that angle because it shows it's anti-competitive. It's the whole industry banding together to set content standards for the entire internet, which is, so dependent on ad revenue. It allows these big advertisers to essentially determine what we can and cannot say.
Allum, great to have you on. I know you were just here recently for 0 Hour with James Polis. Looking forward to watching that. This is such an important issue, near and dear to my heart, of course. And the way I describe this for a lot of businesses is almost like a iron triangle between consulting firms, the advertisers, and then the marketing departments, within the corporations. And all those pieces are woke. I mean, right now, that's what's going on. And it's a terrible, terrible situation. So here we finally have someone, and I'll note, not a normal conservative. Like, this wasn't a conservative company that stood up and did this, but someone who wants to win did this. Now we have someone standing up and fighting this sort of cartel in advertising to keep the flow of dollars out of, in this case, a social media organization. So has this had an effect? Do you think, is this leading the way forward? Are other people following Elon's lead and saying no to this?
So Rumble, obviously a massive video platform, has also filed suit against GARM. That's in addition to the Judiciary Committee's ongoing investigation of the organization. So you really are seeing a lot of pieces coming together for this pushback against the advertising industry's attempts to determine what content is and isn't acceptable on online platforms. And what's interesting, we've been investigating this same organization, this same industry at the Foundation for Freedom Online. We have a couple of reports up on our website, foundationforfreedomonline.com, and one of them shows that these companies, these ad agencies who are members of GARM, are getting billions of dollars from the U.S. taxpayer for things like military recruitment ads and public service announcements and health ads. So not only are these companies banding together to censor platforms like X, but the U.S. taxpayer is being forced to fund this. U.S. citizens are funding their own censorship, the same companies that are pushing for the restriction of their free speech online.
So when you look at this, what would the impact be if they do win? How would they be able to move everything forward?
So I think the key is to, break up this sort of collusive collaboration, right? This anti-competitive banding together of the entire industry in one single cartel. Because when you think about it, the advertising industry is leaving a lot on the table when it doesn't advertise with Rumble, when it doesn't advertise with X, when it doesn't advertise with conservative media. That's millions and millions of eyeballs that they're voluntarily saying, no, we don't want that attention for our brands. We don't want that massive marketplace of attention. And the only way that works really is if all the advertising agencies and all the brands do it at once. Because you can imagine if one advertising agency said, hey, all these other advertisers, all these other brands are boycotting X, I'm going to go and put my ads there and get a much better deal, then the whole system of censorship falls apart.
Yeah, and there's potentially huge opportunity out there when you have this kind of totalizing control, right, in these industries. But I guess my other question is, why did no one do this before? I mean, I can't hammer this enough. It sure seems like this has been going on for a long time. I mean, this has affected our company for a long time. Glenn Beck was one of the first people they did this to, going back before Tucker on Fox News, with advertisers basically boycotting and playing this ridiculous game. But what's alarming to me is, why did it take Elon Musk to sue them and to think of this, legal strategy? And can more people follow his lead and actually be successful?
I think it has been happening for a long time. In fact, in our report on the Foundation for Freedom Online, we point out examples of it going back as far as 2012 and 2013, so over 10 years ago. And I think the reason that happens is because people who are pro-censorship activists realize that with the internet and online platforms so dependent on advertising revenue, and brands often being hesitant to expose themselves to controversy, this has been a real weak point for online free speech, by going after the brands, by frightening them, by saying, oh, you're going to lose business, your brand safety will be impacted if you're on these platforms and your ads are appearing next to this content. They've been able to exploit that, and it really reached a peak, I think, in 2020 and afterwards, because that's when GARM was founded. That's when this cartel emerged and sort of institutionalized the trend that had been happening for the previous 10 years or so.
Now, go ahead.
But I think I want to say one important thing here, which is this concept of brand safety that they always use as the excuse for pulling advertising revenue away from free speech platforms and from alternative media sources. I've actually never seen an example of a mass consumer boycott that happened because a brand's ad appeared on the Blaze or on X or next to an offensive post on social media. But I have seen mass consumer boycotts over things like Gillette's toxic masculinity ad or Bud Light's Dylan Mulvaney ad. There are many examples like that of brands actually losing lots of business and lots of customers because of the advertising industry's own ideological biases. And I think it's those biases that are making them use this excuse of brand safety to pull ads away from conservative platforms, alternative platforms, and free speech platforms. But I don't think they've demonstrated that there's actually a danger of consumer backlash if their ads did appear on alternative media or did appear on free speech platforms.
No, but what's ridiculous is businesses, large corporations, even owned by purported conservatives, will have, woke CMOs and people who will pay millions of dollars to get consultants in media, the supposed experts, who will tell them to their face over and over again that they have to do this. If they don't reach these populations and these identities, they won't sell their product. And it's completely ridiculous. Now, I do firmly believe a lot of these businesses want to break out, but they're stuck. For a place like Blaze, not only are we dealing with this, but this demonetizes us, right? This sort of activity takes away millions of dollars that could be going to the kind of programming our audience so desperately needs and wants. But for a lot of other companies, it's more just taking opportunity off the table, right? If they're not in media directly, it takes an opportunity away from them to get to a large audience that happens to lean right in some cases. Do you have any experience with that? Have you done any research on where businesses stand on this? Do they have strong opinions about it? Is this, in other words, is just the cartel crushing them?
I think businesses have just this habit of trusting the big advertising agencies and trusting these so-called experts on brand safety to tell them where it is and isn't safe to advertise. And we've seen organizations like NewsGuard crop up in the last half decade or so with the rise of online censorship that does the same thing. You know, they build whitelists and blacklists of news companies, and then they sell those whitelists and blacklists to the advertising industry, to advertising agencies, essentially presenting themselves as experts on where it is and isn't safe to advertise. But, you know, again, these so-called experts on brand safety who go and tell businesses that they have their finger on the pulse of public sentiment is the same people who are responsible for disasters like the Bud Light ad and the Gillette toxic masculinity ad. They don't have their finger on the pulse of public sentiment. They don't know what brand safety is, and yet that's their excuse for demonetizing wide swathes of the entire internet and for cutting brands off from these huge consumer markets that they say are too unsafe.
Yeah, and it's nice to see somebody actually coming out and suing. We needed to see the parallel economy being built, but we also needed somebody to come up and sue on a major platform. So, Allum, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. Great to be on.
January 6th arrests are on the rise just in time for the election. More after the break. Yesterday, the U.S. Justice Department reported that January 6th arrests are up 43% in the first 7 months of 2024. So here to break this down for us is Steve Baker, Blaze News investigative journalist. And Steve, we've been talking about these numbers continuing to go up, but it's been 3 years. I mean, what are we looking at with these arrests that are continuing to linger on?
We're looking at a big budget increase that the Department of Justice got last year in the omnibus bill. When I say last year, we're going back quite a ways. I think it was in November or December, as you may recall, in which they specifically asked for additional funding, tens of millions of additional dollars to go after up to 2,000 additional January 6 defendants. And unfortunately, what we're looking at is a ramping up, as you mentioned, because the statute of limitations is going to run out eventually. It runs out on January 6th of 2026. So they really only have a year and a half left to hit their stated goal of about 1,500 to 2,000 more arrests.
Steve, Judicial Watch filed this federal lawsuit. They want the CIA to disclose any involvement in January 6th. I know you've been looking at that too. Any thoughts about that and the CIA's involvement?
Look, we've been suspicious of the CIA's involvement that day for, since it happened. But the reality is we anticipate and we expect some of these agencies to be involved, because anytime there's a large group gathered, there is the potential for foreign nationals, and the CIA specifically is supposed to be looking at foreign terror threats. And then, of course, in their joint terror task force with the FBI and the other agencies, which includes Capitol Police, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's not completely a nefarious thing that they had boots on the ground, but we do know that they had boots on the ground. What we don't have the answers to yet, and in fact, I was speaking to a congressional staffer today about this, and in their own investigations, is do we know yet whether the CIA's bomb-sniffing dog activities had anything to do with Kamala Harris being at the DNC, or were they using their dogs later at the Capitol after they were cleared? The Congress, their investigators do not have the timelines themselves clear on exactly when the CIA was there, why they were there, and what their actual function and orders were.
Yesterday, we were getting some updates. A federal court held the first hearing in a $30 million wrongful death lawsuit filed by the family of Ashli Babbitt. So what can you tell us about this lawsuit and the chances that you think that it has?
Yeah, this is significantly the most tragic event that took place on January 6th was the killing of Ashli Babbitt. And it's confusing. And believe me, as an investigator, and I have been on that particular story for 3.5 years, as you recall, I was the one that actually captured the definitive video of her body, and I believe she was dead at the time, being extracted from the building by the EMS units at the conclusion of the FBI trying to resuscitate her. And unfortunately, I've had I've been back and forth on this question so many times because in the chaos of that moment, and we know that the courts are going to give latitude to a cop because that's what they typically do in a situation like that. But she clearly was not armed, and he made no effort at the time to determine whether he was under threat or not. The problem is that the Capitol Police, their actual rules of engagement for using deadly force, he had several Congress members behind him in that speaker's lobby hallway, and whether he panicked or not, I don't know. Now, he has a history of he has a bad history with firearms. Let's just call it that. And that'll certainly come out in this trial, things that we know about through our own investigations through the Blaze. But I don't know whether this will be successful or not, because again, we're talking about a DC courtroom, a DC judge. The rules are going to be stacked in Michael Byrd's favor, and it was Lieutenant Michael Byrd at the time, and he's since been promoted to captain. So things are not going too badly for him even after he took that shot.
Steve, we reported today at the Blaze that a Pakistani national was arrested for plotting to kill the president a day before the assassination attempt. Any thoughts on that and any updates in what happened that day?
Well, do I have thoughts? Yeah. First of all, this is a revelation by the Department of Justice that the FBI is investigating this. When you get down and you read into the fine print of this particular story, you'll learn that the FBI was actually not involved in the uncovering of this plot or this alleged plot, if it was indeed a plot at all. Because it was New York Police Department. It was their investigators that were involved in this. It was their investigators that found this. It was their confidential sources, and it was their undercover agents that broke this. And then the Department of Justice, the FBI, kind of did what they normally do, and then they said, now we're investigating it, and they're basically taking credit for it. But this is another one of those things where I don't see any, because of the date when he was arrested on July 12th, the day before Trump was, the attempted assassination of former President Trump happened. A lot of people would want to try to tie those things together, particularly this Pakistani had ties also to Iran. He had family in Iran. We don't know if he had political or he had terroristic ties or not. But we do know that these agencies, particularly the FBI, are notorious for finding people that are, in their home countries chanting death to America, and then recruiting them, basically making patsies out of them and we're talking about individuals that have no means otherwise of, they don't have the finances, they don't have the means, they don't have the connections to pull off a terroristic plot of any magnitude whatsoever, certainly not one of taking out a president. But the bottom line is I don't see any connection between the Trump assassination attempt and this particular alleged plot, but we always have to question when the FBI is involved, if this was not just another one of their entrapment schemes to get their numbers up.
And Matthew, he's always one of our favorite guests to have on. Steve always brings all of the best information for us. He updates us probably better than anybody else right now.
Yeah, Steve is, by the way, on January 6th, we need to remember, if you don't know already, you can go and watch a video series called The Truth About January 6th that we will get back to finishing with Steve's excellent work. We're going to push forward on that. And then, of course, the good work he and Joe Hanneman are also doing on the assassination attempt. So thank you. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
When we come back, Great Britain is locked in a clash of civilizations. We'll have two Brits on to explain next. The rise of Islam in the UK is largely ignored in American media, but our next guests say that there's an all-out war on Christianity across the pond. So here to break it down for us is Calvin Robinson, British conservative commentator, writer, and an ordained priest in the Nordic Catholic Church. And in studio with us is Matthew Marsden, actor and BlazeTV contributor. So Calvin, let's start with you. Can you just tell us why there's so much unrest right now in the UK?
First of all, hey, Matthew Marsden, didn't know you were going to be here too, buddy. How are you? The unrest in the United Kingdom is not entirely unexpected. This has been coming for a long, long time, but there was one particular incident that sparked it in the last few days. It was the unfortunate killing of 3 innocent girls and the serious injury of 11 more at a Taylor Swift dance place. A young 17-year-old man attacked these innocent girls, and the mainstream media and the politicians, the establishment as a whole, including the police, tried to sweep it under the carpet. They wouldn't tell us who he was, where he came from, what his motivation was, and so people started speculating when they saw that he didn't look Welsh. And then they found out that, oh, his parents were from Rwanda. And so people were asking, is this down to mass immigration? Now, it may be, or it may not be, but the fact that the establishment don't want to give us the details makes everyone come to conclusions in their own minds. And so while we were mourning as a country the loss of these three beautiful little girls, people got upset, people got angry, and it's righteous anger, absolutely. But the problem is some of that spilled over into violence. But the violence has been sporadic all over the country by different people of different demographics. And again, the mainstream establishment, from the media to the politicians to the police, have come out and said, these people are all far-right thugs. And so the British people are saying, well, we're not far-right and we're not thugs. We're upset and we're angry and we're frustrated at you. And then we've seen Mohammedans come out and protest and riot with machetes and planks of wood, beating white Britons, damaging cars, private property. And then the police, the mainstream media, and the politicians come out and say, oh, we need to protect our Muslim communities more. And so the British people are saying, wait a minute, you're ostracizing us, denigrating us, calling us far-right thugs, and then you're protecting the people who are attacking us. What's going on with the balance? Where's policing without fear or favour? This is a two-tiered system. On top of that, we've got the fact that people are being rushed through the court system. So anyone that's involved in these riots is being rushed through and sent to prison at the same time as people who've committed serious crimes over the last few months are still waiting for their time in court, never mind in prison. At the same time as the first thing our Prime Minister said when he came into office a month ago was that our prisons are full. There's no room in the prisons. We're going to have to start letting people out early. None of it seems to add up, is what this comes down to. And people are fed up, angry, upset, and it's going to get a bit worse.
Matthew Marsden, you are a UK citizen, and now you live here. And what's it like for you watching all of this unfold back there?
Well, I mean, I think that Calvin just absolutely crystallized it perfectly. I think that we've had, certainly since I've been in America, which is 25 years now, is that you've seen regular folk who have been very accepting of people coming into the country. All they continually be told is that they're racist, that they're this, that they're that. Even when something happens, for example, there's a terrorist attack and the police don't come out and say, look, this is Islamic terror. They're like, we don't understand. We don't know the cause for this. It's like just giant gaslighting. So what you've had over all this period of time is the British people being put second. I mean, it's happened over here, but you have maybe two generations now of young Brits that are like, we have no prospects. We keep on getting told that we are bad people, that we're racist, when we're not racist, when we're completely accepting of these people. But you have to call a spade, as it were, and just say, look, this is wrong, and that's not happening. So you're getting this culmination of demonizing one group of people. As Calvin said, other people are getting off, and there is this two-tier justice system. And again, as Calvin said, this was a catalyst. This event with these 3 beautiful girls who got murdered is just a catalyst for years and years and years of epic gaslighting from feckless leaders in the UK.
So one question I have for both of you, because it's very troubling to me to see this go on. But another way, it sort of at least is something. And what you see all over Europe as well are these populist uprisings, these people who are very upset, but nothing ever happens. No one ever represents them. And it strikes me that that's maybe what's going on here. And what will happen? I mean, will they be represented?
It's not possible in our current system. So from the media, we've got our mainstream broadcasters, so the BBC, our state broadcaster, Sky, Rupert Murdoch's channel over in this country, have been gaslighting continuously. First and foremost, they blamed the riots on the English Defence League, which hasn't existed since 2013, just so they could say it's far right. at this. And whilst we see on the streets the Muslim Defence League have been out causing trouble, but no one addresses that. And so that the media's gaslighting. The politicians, the centre-right party has just been voted out of office last month. So we have the centre-left party, which is probably more far left at this point in office. They're not going to help us. They don't care about the working classes. They don't care about the ordinary folk. We have the Reform Party, who just won 5 seats, who are slightly further to the right. However, their leader, Nigel Farage, has quickly become establishment and throwing people under the bus, saying, I have nothing to do with these far-right thugs such as Tommy Robinson, just dropping people under the bus left, right and centre to protect his own bacon. So there's no one standing up for ordinary folk. So actually, I think the violence will get worse, and that's a great shame because, as I said before, we have to be angry, righteous indignation. But when we let that fall over into violence, we're letting ourselves down and everyone else. But there is no democratic means to fix things. So what else can we do? What is the solution?
Marsden?
No, I agree 100%. I don't think there's anyone representing the regular rank and file Brits over there, you know, the working class that have been disenfranchised. They've been told that they're evil, they're bad people for years and years and years. And like you said, unfortunately, Farage has now collapsed, as they say, like a flan in a cupboard, because at the smallest push now, he has backed off. He's thrown people like Tommy Robinson under the bus. And so, again, that inflames people even more because we don't have anyone that is strong enough to stand up and represent people. And I've said this over and over, that I'm not condoning any kind of violence in any way, shape or form. I don't think anyone, that they're both as bad as each other if they're going to cause violence. But this has been 25 years in the making, if not longer. What else are they going to do to have their feelings heard? And what's even worse is when there's violence on the left, like we saw with the Black Lives Matter, with what's going on with the Muslim Defence League here, everyone wants to run to understand them. Why is it they feel like this? What is this? They must be reacting to something, like someone who's being bad to them. But when you start talking about regular Brits, and I'm not just talking about white, right? Because this isn't a race thing, right? It's not. Islam is not a race, right? People keep trying to say it's a race thing, but Islam is not a race. These people are massively disenfranchised and they don't have a say in their own country.
Well, and they can't run online and say what they want to say because let's go ahead and listen to this soundbite from the UK earlier this week.
The offence of incitement to racial hatred involves publishing or distributing material which is insulting or abusive, which is intended to or likely to start racial hatred. So if you retweet that, then you're republishing that, and then potentially you're committing that offence. And we do have dedicated police officers who are scouring social media. Their job is to look for this material and then follow up with identification arrests and so forth. So it's a really, really serious. People might think they're not doing anything harmful. They are, and the consequences will be visited upon them.
Calvin, what's your reaction when you hear that?
You heard that right. He's got police officers scouring the internet looking for retweets to arrest people. I mean, this is 1984 in practice. This is 2024. When we don't have police to arrest people who are burgling, committing knife crimes, which are at all-time highs in this country, we have police to sit on the internet looking for people retweeting things that may be wrong. You know, a few years ago, I used to see people with things in their bios on Twitter saying retweets are not endorsements. And I used to think, why are they putting that? What a waste of characters. But now I understand it, because the government in the UK is going to hold you accountable for things that other people have said. And a lot of this actually does come down to Twitter, because we've seen the Met Police Chief, and we've seen the Prime Minister, and we've seen the DPP there all saying this is down to social media, this is down to retweets. And what they're getting at is that they keep saying they want to stop the spread of misinformation. And that's a very important word that they're using when they talk about the spreading of misinformation, because misinformation might be something that's true or not true, but spread under false pretensions, or spread out of mistake, not knowing. Whereas disinformation is when you spread something on purpose to cause offence or to spread misinformation on purpose. So what the police and the government are saying when they say they want to stop misinformation spreading is they want to stop information spreading that they don't see as true, that we may see as true, but they don't. And in a world where there are a plurality of truths, that's quite scary when there's only one approved narrative.
Marsden, you get the final word on this.
Yeah, they're trying to say right now that they are going to try and ban Twitter. I heard from someone that they were saying they were going to try and pass legislation so that in some way, shape or form, they will ban Twitter, which is just going to make things even worse. And I think that a lot of Brits don't understand. They think that they have freedom of speech. They clearly don't have freedom of speech, and they don't have anything in there. They don't have a constitution like we do that protects our freedom of speech. It's just a tradition of. They're in a lot of trouble. This isn't going away anytime soon. And I think that after COVID, people have realized, listen, you are not taking away my rights anymore. They've kind of woken up to it. And so I think that this is not a good thing for England in the sense, and Great Britain in the sense that the violence is not going to stop. The more they clamp down, they're also doing something, by the way, called Operation Scatter. So they're taking the people in the hotels and they're scattering them around the country. This is just a recipe for disaster.
Well, I hope that everything de-escalates. But gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you. God bless.
Our next guest will tell you how to get your kids ready for back to school and dress for success when we get back. World War III hasn't started yet, so you're still going to have to do some back-to-school shopping for your little ones. And how do you dress to impress when they're so small? Blaze Media staff writer Helen Roy has got you covered in her recent articles for Blaze News, and she joins us right now. So, Helen, let's start with the little girls first. What are the essentials for them?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. I want to just say quickly, I think my most boomer complaint is something that a lot of people say, a lot of older people say, but it is certainly true, which is that we have forgotten how to dress. And this, of course, has trickled down to our little ones. We have forgotten how to dress our little ones in a way that is dignified. And, you know, I think casual wear is totally fine for when you're around the house and things of that nature. But I always like to put my children together when we're going places. So yeah, my basic rule of thumb for dressing the kids is, and I say this as a proud American, but also an Anglophile, if Catherine the Princess of Wales wouldn't do it, then you shouldn't do it either. One thing that Kate Middleton has always done for her children, and she dresses her children better than anyone in the world, is that she is insistent on the appropriate underwear and outerwear when they're going places. So her kids' socks always match. Her girls are always wearing tights or bloomers, and they usually have a cardigan or something of this nature to just fill out their ensemble. So I'll just quickly go through my list for girls. Number one, something that we've really forgotten as a society is bloomers and or diaper covers. And this is just something that goes over the diaper, goes over underwear, so that little girls who are as boisterous as boys can play freely and not have to worry about showing, you know, their undercarriage in public. So number one is going to be bloomers. You can find these anywhere, but I really like the store Little English. If not bloomers, especially as we're moving into fall and winter, you're going to want to invest in some tights. And I like to adjust these to the seasons. And also I really appreciate some embroidery and things of this nature. Basically in everything that I'm going to list out, I think there's always an opportunity to add whimsy and fun and even incorporate family symbols into your kids' clothing. So tights is going to be the next essential. Socks as well, if they're not wearing tights. And a classic sock that not a lot of people wear anymore, but is so lovely, are the white socks with ruffles, and they go perfectly with the next item on the list, which are called Mary Jane shoes. Now, these are, a lot of people have forgotten what these are actually called, but these are the type of shoes that you'd see, like if you're going to church, things of this nature. They're leather. They have usually some punched out little design on them and a buckle or Velcro. And they're great. They're comfortable. They can play freely in them. And I really like the brand Felix and Flora for Mary Jane shoes. Okay, next, something that I really love, especially if your kids don't have a uniform, are bishop dresses, smocked dresses. So I'm from the South, where this is this is like second nature to us. We get it. We remember these terms, but a lot of people do not, and they don't grow up with them, but they are just those classic cotton dresses that are smocked around the neck. So there's lots of fabric at the bottom, and then they're sewed together and sort of tightly around the neck, but in a sort of stretchy, with a stretchy material. And there's usually some kind of embroidery or symbol or monogram, something of that nature, embroidered around the neckline. These go fabulously in any season, and you can throw cardigans and coats on top, tights underneath to adjust.
Awesome. Helen, let's move on to the little boys now. We're running out of time here. So what's essential for them?
Okay, essential for the little boys. Now, this term, again, easily forgotten, Johns are the boys' form of smocking. So they're not dresses. They sort of come together like overalls at the bottom. But again, there's places for their favorite motifs to be embroidered, and they're really just so delightful and lovely for little boys. Okay, socks, navy or white is what I typically go with. Shoes, boys wear Mary Janes too, but you can also find Oxford shoes or boat shoes for them, which are very versatile. And then really, you cannot go wrong for little boys with the chino, blazer, and Oxford shirt combination. It's so versatile. You can really mix up, especially in the springtime, the colors and the chinos, but a classic navy blazer with brass buttons over top an Oxford shirt, you absolutely cannot go wrong. And one last thing I'll say is that I absolutely love for little boys, a woven belt. And once again, and this is something that's easy to forget, but once again, it's something where you can incorporate family motifs and symbols and really just delight in how your children look.
Helen Roy, thank you so much. That was such a good, extensive list that you gave us there. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, my pleasure.
And Matthew, this is part of Align, and it's kind of it's more than just the news. It's actually practical things that people can do in their daily lives.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to go through all this volatility and all this insane stuff over the next, 6 months. We're still going to live our lives, and we're going to need to think hard about how we live them better. And that's what Align is all about. Align your life with your values in very practical ways.
And that's it. It really ties into what we were doing today earlier in the show with the Elon Musk. He's going out and suing the advertisers. So it's the parallel economy. It's taking back what we can take back. But everything is coming together now, it feels like.
Yeah, a bunch of us are going to band together and build an American way of life worthy of the name in the 21st century. And it doesn't matter what everyone else, all the crazy people do. We're going to do it.
And World War III isn't here yet. So until then, we're going to keeping on. So go ahead and make sure to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast platform. And don't forget to rate and review the show, please, 5 stars. It helps everybody else to discover the show. And, the news cycle has been insane, and it's not going to slow down anytime soon. So we will definitely be back here to break it down tomorrow night.